My name is Paul. My ideal school is Waterman High School. It's going to be somewhere in Western New York, probably on at least next to a reservation, and because that's kind of where I grew up. So the name is based off of Carson Waterman, who is an artist, but it's not necessarily going to be an art-centered school, although I will highlight that as we go. The name is more about Carson's story. He went through Thomas Indian School, which is a boarding school meant for Native American children to unlearn their culture. And he also went to the Vietnam War. So it's more about his story of growing up in poverty and going through all these challenges and still becoming successful. If the school had a slogan, which it's a 9 through 12 school, the slogan would be supported teachers, support students, achieve greatness. School population, similar to where I grew up, but for the percentages, I did add to those to make it a lot more diverse. And even if it wasn't, I still would want the curriculum to reflect everybody, even if there's only a few students from that background. It's also lower middle class, lots of poverty. And just to make things easy, I did about 500 students, which would mean 125 per grade. We're doing 15 to 1 teacher to student ratio. And I gave about 54 with disabilities, which is actually less than the national average from the research I did, which I'm not really going to be referencing and citing stuff as we go because there's just not time. I realized I had a lot of stuff in here. So, teacher breakdown. Basically, it's going to be more teachers than normal. That's kind of my ideal school. My high school didn't have 8 English teachers. It maybe had 4, maybe 5 if you count one of the special ed teachers. So the core subjects, there's going to be for required courses, which for each grade, I'm following the New York State guidelines. You need 3 credits of science and history. That's why there's 2 teachers for those per grade, which equals 6. You're going to have 2 ninth grade history teachers, 2 10th grade history teachers, and so on, which is why English has the most because there's 4 required credits. You have to do English every year. One more art teacher than I'm used to, and way more special ed teachers than I'm used to. So for special ed, they can be specialized in a core subject plus 1. So there's going to be 1 for each of math, science, English, history. And then I just want more because I feel like special education gets neglected and I want to make sure there's enough for the 54 students we have. The blurbs at the bottom, every core subject has a permanent teacher's aide, so that's going to be even more bodies in the classroom. I know that from my experience, it is all about, oh, we've got to reach the mandate of bodies in the classroom. But the teacher's aides here are going to be trained. So trained on behavior management, there's going to be about 4 per grade. Um, as I said, each for the core subject. And the cool thing here is there's a way to move up. There's professional development even for the teacher's aides, where they can move up to be teacher's assistants. I don't know exactly how that would work legally, if they got to be certified or take any kind of courses, but I feel like they're going to be learning a lot in the classroom, and learning in the classroom is professional development at its best, in my opinion. Next. This is just a little bit more on special ed because I feel like it's important to talk about the services and least restrictive environment, which is these kind of 3 to 4 levels I have going. Push in, there will be more push in than pull out, that should say services, which just means in my ideal school, there would be less taking kids with special services out of the room and more adults coming in the room to help them. And again, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about, there's so many different ways to do professional development. And I feel like that's another way is going into a room with a teacher who's teaching, and you gotta still help a student. And that main gen ed teacher also has to, navigating relationships with other teachers, I feel like is part of professional development. So having different minds and different ways of teaching in the room is part of that. So LRE, I kind of stopped it after self-contained. You could get more restrictive, which is what I'm trying to limit because I want inclusion. I have some schedules here. I got to go through these fast. Basically, it's about creating schedules based on students and teachers to an extent, but mainly students' talents and skills and wants. So Irene likes art. She's in ninth grade. Um, I might have been able to take art as one elective, but it was only 40 minutes. It was like 10 class periods a day when I was in high school. So I switched that up. I'm using A, B, C, D days, which are just alternating every other for the most part, which I've seen in middle school. I haven't seen that personally in high schools, and I didn't grow up with that. So for me, that is pretty innovative. The class periods are longer. Math and English group is going to come up a few times. Groups for those core subjects, I feel like not only is there going to be teachers for various subjects in the rooms, professional development, working with each other, but also these could be a study hall, somebody to work on their assignments. It limits homework, which is a big goal. But also older kids can tutor, and that can be like a level of development for them. If they're understanding of a subject, they can tutor the lower levels. Connor's in 12th grade. As you can see, Irene had a lot of white because those are still the required courses, which I still think are all important. Obviously, the curriculum can be very diverse, though. Connor has a lot of blue because in his little blurb, he's preparing for college. So these classes reflect that. And because these are college level courses, his math groups that we have, whereas Irene was more because she needs more support. Maybe she has an IEP and that is brought directly into her schedule. For Connor, it's like giving him the opportunity to get that college level work done during the school day rather than having all this stuff to do at home. And now there's more time for extracurriculars, which um, sports, clubs, all that is ideal for my school. Now we've got three teachers. For English, we have Mrs. Kinney. So everything in white for her, again, is there's five classes. For English 10, she has one English 11, five classes in her 4-day period um, that are required. She's got to teach five English classes, right? She's got a prep period every day that's an hour. Some days on day A, she's got an hour and a half prep period. Some teachers have that extra one, depending. But she also chose to do some elective courses. Either she volunteered for, or they asked, like, hey, we need somebody to teach journalism. You have these skills, or would you like to develop these skills and co-teach? So those are all opportunities I would want. For math, same thing. She has her required. She has a little bit longer of a prep time because it's the hour and 15-minute slot. And she's also choosing to teach an AP class. Also, I didn't mention there's two bell schedules. I was trying to accommodate two different lunch periods. And then the special ed teacher, I made sure to give him prep periods because I feel like that's not talked about enough for special ed. And he has outside and STEAM center and resource room. He kind of runs that to help students with disabilities, but that alternates between because we have 5 special ed teachers, there's room to alternate. Teachers can take over that classroom and help students. So STEAM Center, and I feel like for an outside learning center, it's more than just a pavilion. It would be a greenhouse. It would be trails outside in nature. STEAM room, I'm not forgetting the A because this is Waterman High School. I do want there to be a little bit more art focus. So big tables like these are great for not only science projects, but art projects. Obviously, there's a lot of technology in this kind of room. A sewing room I thought would be really cool to have in a high school because it's teaching a life skill and it also can bring in the community. So there could be an after school club for sewing where you can bring in your grandma or your mom who knows how to sew or wants to make something with you. This is a low income community. So fixing your clothes and making your own clothes is important. I lengthened the school year. I'm just going to try to be brief. And I eliminated Friday. It's not required, but students can still come and teachers can still come and they would be paid if they need a prep period or if special education, if there's a student that needs special services, they could still come. And any student can still go because, for one, a lot of families depend on the school lunch, so that would be provided. But also, students could catch up with late work. They could go to the library and find a book to read. But yeah, I decided to extend the school year. I have things referenced in my citations, but students can lose a lot of progress over the summer. So I shortened that gap. I mean, especially for students with disabilities, they can lose a lot of progress in social skills. But even general education students can. I remember that just a jump from algebra into 10th grade geometry, I was like, whoa, I forgot how to do these steps that I need. So I did extend it a little bit, but I still gave breaks throughout the year. I feel like that helps teachers and students and families too. Teachers, preference of diversity, if that's an option. Have teachers that one of the YouTube videos about African American students, one of the students said they wanted teachers that looked like them. So the boy wanted an African American male teacher. That's really important. If you have a grandparent caretaker of a student, the teacher should have the option to write a letter to that caretaker. You know, maybe that person likes a handwritten letter. So opening different lines of communication. I'm going to browse through the curriculum because it's basically about being diverse. I put a lot into this, but I just don't have time. Basically for English, there's still some classical stuff in there, traditional stuff, especially for the plays and poetry. But there's so many fun. You could present the play, have people act out the play. I replaced things like To Kill a Mockingbird, even though there's credibility to that book. I instead gave a book called The Hate You Give, which is by a Black author with a Black protagonist to talk about racism. Just less research papers. Same with history. More hands-on projects like this Longhouse project, which I think I did in 7th grade, and I know people have done that younger, but it doesn't have to be Native American. Just after they learn about all these cultures, they will build some sort of dwelling. They get to choose the culture, so it can be something found in Mexico. It can be something from the student's own ethnicity, which I think is important. That's a great way to diversify curriculum. But yes, Native American focus in this school. That's what they're going to start out the semester with, and they're going to come back to it where we are, branch out and come back to um, the tribes around here. Once they talk about imperialism, we could talk about how it affected us specifically here, us and um, how it affected the Native American tribes in Western New York. and then branch out, kind of going like this rather than only hearing about a culture once and then not again for like 2 years or whatever. Different kinds of projects were listed. Um, Lunch, I have something cited here. This quote, how it's a barrier, that social stigma about needing free lunch. I think lunch should be free for everybody, free and appropriate public education. That's the law. And then I came up with that phrase, you cannot learn appropriately if you're hungry. You cannot be hungry if lunch is free. Discipline, from some of the articles I cited, um, removing the SRO and replacing it with counseling, which would include meetings, circles, and groups, checking in with students as much as possible, asking them how they're doing. And those meetings, having students who maybe were in conflict, like talk it out, basically. More counselors in the school, just like more teachers in the school. And I think that is it for me.